It's like a minute. Okay. We are live, so I'm going to go ahead and take the time to get us going. Let me share my screen. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So here we are. We are at our second meeting of the year. So we meet bi-monthly. So we're at our March meeting. Quick little overview of today's agenda. So we will have a flood stat update. I don't want to disappoint you all, but it will be me standing in for Robert. He's traveling, but also we are at that time of year where thankfully we don't have too much flood and tide trends to share, but I'll give you a little recap of what Robert sent me and then also a little teaser and preview of next meeting that Robert and the flood stat team will bring up. And then I'll give a little update about some of these resilience highlights and projects that I've been updating you all on and where that status of those are. And then I'm also really excited to have my counterpart at Charleston County here today. Molly, she is the Resilience and Sustainability Manager at Charleston County. So she's going to be talking about, I already see a typo there, but the Charleston Resilience Collaborative, something that we've been working hand in hand with the county and establishing. And then of course, Matt from our stormwater department will be giving us an update, I'm told, broadly on our 2026 capital projects. And then, of course, we'll save space for the mayor to give an update and time for members to have some committee discussion as well. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick recap of our flood stat from Robert. As you can see, it was a pretty dry early start to the year. I think you can see there, this is, again, Robert shared at the beginning of the year, these tools that are publicly accessible for everybody to access of our local trends that the National Weather Service puts out and NOAA. So as you can see here that we had, just one event where we had a very moderate tide level or minor flood level here from tidal events in January. So we're good to go. I think we should anticipate to see this data perhaps trend upward a bit. And with that said, please take note, we want this to be educational purposes for folks watching. We are going to start rolling into king tide season. So April 18th. So between now and our next meeting in May, we will have one event. So just want folks to mark that on their calendar. Obviously, that little graphic there is indicating our city tie-dye app. And we clearly want folks to bookmark that on your web browser, on your homepage, on your phone screens. Check that, particularly as we approach April 18th and see what the status of our roads and conditions are. And of course, always report your flooding photos through that as well. So that's your kind of preview coming up with our flood stat, but also next time Robert's in front of you all, he's going to talk. We've talked briefly, particularly the one meeting at the end of the year. We talked about our reported road closures and things of that nature. And he's piloting some flood sensors to calculate the flood depths on our roadways and some of these key flooding areas. I know last year too, this committee provided some input of some potential future locations. So he'll give you a little bit more update on that front. And then I've also talked about our partnership we have with the College of Charleston that is helping us manage and monitor the groundwater monitorings, 14 of them we have across the city. So really excellent progress being made on that. They've gone out and done a couple of readings and also creating a public dashboard. So this is something we hope we could either integrate within tie-dye or somewhere publicly having this information available. So a little teaser of what's to come for flood stat for the next time we all get together. I am going to very briefly run through some very high level updates from the resilience world and some of these projects and planning efforts and communication and engagement that I'm working on. We have completed as part of the larger Rosemont Resilience Plan. The city's completed a flood action plan. As a reminder, this is our pilot of these community adaptation plans that have been outlined in the water plan. And this is sort of our first one that we have a go at, and hoping to have this website live by the end of the week so that folks can publicly access this or sharing it with the community. We've been engaged with the community throughout this. And then similarly to that, we have, we've talked about, the city applied at the end of the year for this New Market Creek grant. We were awarded that. Matt and his team is finalizing that agreement with hopefully some work kicking off towards the spring and early this summer. Similarly, we were doing some restoration work and stormwater management work at a smaller scale on Halsey Creek. So I think we'll have a little more development to share with y'all, hopefully by May or by our summertime meeting. I don't want to steal Matt's thunder, but some really key stormwater and capital projects that we're proud of that certainly live under the umbrella of resilience that's come online just this year is obviously we just completed the low battery rehabilitation work. Please check it out if you haven't been down at the turn at White Point Garden. It's obviously the elevated promenade there, the reinforcement of the structure, but also beautiful parklet space, landscaping that's been part of that project as well, and roadway improvements. And then two of our big nature-based ecological parks that have come online are Dale Morris Ecological Park out in Johns Island and the Bridge Point out in West Ashley. And then even more exciting news, we obviously through our partnership with the Army Corps, you'll see some of the projects that we're tracking and continuously working on through our tidal and inland study, and obviously our battery extension project. But we've also secured an additional $9 million for some stormwater projects that we've been working on with the Army Corps, including our brick arches rehabilitation work and some stormwater management out in the DuPont Wapu Basin out in West Ashley, and some funding for the Oak Forest neighborhood. So more to come on all of those. We're excited about all this activity that we've had surrounding these projects. Of course, WaterWise, that is our communications arm for all things flooding and resilience. And we are excited to partner with Gray and the Carolina Ocean Alliance to have a New Market Creek sweep in March. So, again, welcome from this committee. Any other kind of community events that we can partner on or hold in your community, please don't hesitate to reach out to let me know. And then again, why Molly is here today is to talk about this Charleston Resilience Collaborative. So I won't spoil her time to talk about that, but I did really quickly. Again, our WaterWise March Spotlight is working with nature at your own kind of specific scale. We're moving into landscaping season, so check out our website. We have a bunch of links to all these really helpful tools for folks, whether you want to install some green infrastructure on your property through rain gardens, native planting guides. Preservation Society of Charleston has an awesome resilience guidance for landscaping. So all these are up on our WaterWise. So please check that out. Please share with your neighbors. And then finally, this is segueing nicely into Molly, and what she'll be sharing with us today is this pushing of regional collaboration through resilience. So quickly do want to plug tomorrow, the countywide intergovernmental flood prevention task force is holding their quarterly meeting. It will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. right here in city council chambers. So again, I think I talked to you about this last year, but this is our state delegation hosts this task force for all the jurisdictions to come together to talk site-specific stormwater projects, but work through some policies as well. And then our latest and greatest regional collaboration is the Charleston Resilience Collaborative. And again, Molly Caggiano from the county is here to talk with us a little bit more about that today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will introduce Molly. I will say it's really exciting. This collaborative has gotten where it is. It started with just Molly and I ping-ponging a lot of some of the barriers that we face, and then bringing other municipalities into a sort of informal working group that's now broadening to this structural group that really is looking towards bringing resilience plans into implementation and action. So Molly, please take over, and hopefully you can share. Let me know if you can't.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin. Let's see, can you see that?
It's loading, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, thank you so much for that introduction and for having me today. As Caitlin said, I'm Molly Caggiano. I'm the Resilience and Sustainability manager at the county and feel so grateful to be working with Kaylin. I started at the county maybe just over a year ago, and it's been really exciting to kind of see this partnership really evolve with what has already been going on with resilience and collaborating between jurisdictions, and then having the county kind of step in and start being a convener for this. So this is really exciting. Um, so before before we get into the collaborative, there was a lot of work that went into this. So the county adopted a hazard vulnerability assessment back in 2024, which is a huge database of all of the vulnerabilities, risks, hazards, and everything is quantified based on county assessor data of what that risk actually looks like in dollars. So this is a really awesome resource that I'm working on right now, trying to get published, so it's publicly available. And I know that the city also completed a vulnerability assessment with the same consultants back in 2019, I believe. So very, very cool that we are kind of being consistent in our planning, and making this county-wide is really exciting. So that vulnerability assessment also has a bunch of strategies in it, and that is my main role at the county to implement those strategies. So the Reality Check 2.0 piece that came in April of 2025, that was hosted by the COG and the Urban Land Institute. And this was again kind of building on a lot of the conversations that have been happening in the region in terms of population growth, infrastructure, and then of course our climate risks. And in April, a lot of decision makers were there to talk about what their priorities are and how we can collaborate and come together around some shared vision for how to kind of go on the same path together. And those guiding principles, barriers, and implementation strategies are a great framework to start kind of using to think regionally about hazard risk, but also about the population changes and, of course, the infrastructure improvements that need to be made. Then in November of 25, Charleston County held a resilience and sustainability symposium, which I think many of you attended, including you, Mr. Mayor. And there was the intention behind this was this basically was an ask that came out of our Resilience and Sustainability Advisory Committee to say, hey, let's see what everyone is doing and like actually bring everyone together and talk about it. So we had over 180 attendees at that symposium from the nonprofit sector, from local, federal, state, and regional governments, as well as several consultants and folks that we work closely with in the private sector, some philanthropic organizations. So all this to say, there are a lot of people that are involved in this work of resilience and sustainability, and we know this. At this symposium, we also started kind of auditing all of the work that people are doing with in terms of initiatives, plans, programs, basically what are you doing that has any relation to sustainability and resilience? And at the end of that day, we had a local government practitioners session that got us kind of into a space where we were identifying what those barriers were, what the solutions could be for working through this at like a local government level. And that session is what kind of set up the agenda for this accelerator workshop that we held in just last month in February. And these barriers that we identified were, everything from the poor coordination across jurisdictions and agencies, community engagement fatigue, loss of trust, outdated and flexible regulatory standards. So basically just naming all of the things that we know to be true in terms of kind of challenges or obstacles to doing our work. And this was basically the framework for how we structured the accelerator workshop. So basically all of this to say there is a lot of planning, a lot of thought, a lot of visioning that we've put in place, but actually moving this into implementation is where I think this collaborative can come together and be really useful. So we held this accelerator workshop that was a more specific group of folks instead of the 180 from everywhere and anywhere. We were focusing on local government, and we had over 40 staff from local governments and academia with the county convening. And the goal was not only to talk through those barriers again, but think through how are we going to collectively start acting on our plans. We have these plans, but how can we work together to really start implementing? So during that day, we developed impact statements and action items. So we said we all identified vulnerabilities that are impacting our work, like our personal work, and how we can, you know, in our own roles, take action to improve that process or to, enhance that project in some way. So we were really trying to focus on our sphere of influence here. So this isn't to say that the Resilience Collaborative is entirely exclusive to government, but right now we're trying to kind of get everything in order in terms of especially county staff, how we can start kind of coming out of our departments and start working together on shared goals, and then have that, of course, be scaled out, scaled up, down to municipalities, and then ideally the region. And again, a lot of this collaborative work has been started kind of by the city, and I'm hoping to just kind of scale it so we can kind of support as much as we can to get everyone kind of rowing in the same direction, is the analogy we always say. So some insights from the workshop. Again, there's this disconnect between planning and implementation. A lot of folks were saying that, we put all this time into putting these long range plans together, and we're thinking really far out, but that's been a challenge for connecting it to the now and like, can we do today? And, priorities also change after several years. Another really interesting insight was this meaning of education. I think every table at the workshop talked about public education and outreach, and how to do that kind of better. Um, and I think the overwhelming kind of consensus is that there's not necessarily a lack of outreach or engagement. It's more the kind of tailoring the message of what we're trying to say, and making that having that be said in a unified way, where we're using the same language and we're kind of talking in the same terms to really make messages stick. And I think that's a great role for this collaborative to step in and really, have all of these jurisdictions come together and talk about what makes sense when we're talking about this issue in my community, and how can we kind of convey that with language that folks will kind of be receptive to. And then lastly, of course, building trust with the public through implementation and storytelling. I think building trust with the public is showing, right, what we're doing, and implementing and having a visible project is a really great way to build that trust. But if we're not doing that, then how can we create that narrative again, that shared story that we're all telling? So we're all aware of why a project or a decision was made, or why that decision wasn't made, and what the impact is of that in a way that's kind of transparent and clear, and that folks will understand. So the goal of the Resilience Collaborative is, again, this is emerging concept. This is evolving. So these are not set in stone, but the initial goals of the collaborative are to kind of create a repository for data. So we're all looking in the same place, or at least using the same information to inform our decisions. We also want to support that implementation at the collaborative level. So again, we're all still operating within our own jurisdictional boundaries and our own like lines of authority, but we can then support each other with sharing information. How are we doing things so we can be more aligned in that way? Coordinating projects, similarly, aligning kind of shared goals and shared kind of initiatives to see how we can leverage each other's capacity. And then measuring results. How are we talking in a unified way about what resilience means and what making progress towards resilience means? Like how are we measuring that in a real way that we can all agree on? So the next steps for the collaborative are to reconvene in May. We're going to refine the findings, some of those preliminary insights that I shared with you from the workshop. We're going to share those in a way that's a little bit more meaningful and like usable for, taking these next steps. And then we're going to determine those strategies for implementation. So one of the things that kind of kept rising to the top was this hazard vulnerability assessment data and how do we get our hands on it and use it and make that a kind of a uniform way where we're talking about information. So hosting trainings on using that data and then also developing those resilience metrics based on that data. So we're again, we're all like using the same like starting from the same place. And helping us frame the story or frame the conversation in the same way. So all that to say, there is a lot of work to do. But there's a really great path forward that I think all of us are very ready to jump onto. The collaboration with the city is very strong, and this is such a great foundation for kind of again scaling this up and out. The Sea Islands have also been really engaged in this as well, and I think I'd love to talk through opportunities for, if there's engagement opportunities with WaterWise and with the water plan and with flood basins, maybe that's a way to kind of another avenue for collaborating and communicating the shared message. But I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. I think I'm glad you added at the end because I was gonna, ask you of, the city and other entities if they have, commissions and committees like we have here, like what is the best way for us to provide input into the work that the collaborative will do? And I think you addressed that. But I I may turn to Mr. Mayor to give a little experience about he had with joining the county in the fall and some of the work that you've been doing with collaborating with how this has been going with your cohorts and counterparts across the county. And I think there's been a lot of trajection in that way.
Yeah, it's been pretty positive. I mean, particularly as it relates to flooding. I mean, it's an issue that we all face. It's not just city specific, as we all know. And they've been very supportive, particularly around the conversations of the transportation sales tax and allocating some of those funds towards resiliency efforts, and certainly appreciate that. It wasn't as much as we wanted, but there's a lot of needs, and I think they did a really good job on partitioning everything out. But it's still a work in progress. I think everybody knows that they have a list out right now for the breakdown on where greenbelt funds go, where public transportation funds, how many percentages, and the named projects. And that's open for about another 2 or 3 weeks. They've got a series of 3 meetings that they're going to be getting public input on it before they finalize the list and put it on the ballot. So encourage anybody, everybody obviously on this call is invested. Just making sure people are aware and get their 2 cents in, because I think this is a really big deal. All the efforts that we're doing need money, and this is the deepest or biggest pot, if you will, and it is essential for a variety of reasons that it passes in November. So the more educated people are, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I think, with this propping up of this collaborative, that can certainly be, this coordinated arm to move a lot of these messaging and advocacies that, because
Sure.
I think what I took away, Molly, when we were with folks is everybody has the same thoughts and shared vision, right? So it's this collective, actual organized way to do this. So, one more minute. If anybody has any other questions for Molly, I know you have to drop, so thank you for your time, but while we're here. And if not, then we will move on to Mr. Fountain, who will give us a 2026 capital projects from stormwater update. Is that correct, Matt?
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah, thank
great.
you. Share my screen, get us into our presentation. So I'm going to try to keep this relatively high level. Presentation will show. There we go. And be able to kind of drill down with any questions. There's a lot to cover, so I don't want to take too much time. But again, going through our major capital project updates at this point. Wanted to start with a little bit of discussion about funding, since that's been an item we've been talking about. City does a lot with partnership work to be able to fund the stormwater projects that we're putting forward. The item that most people, I think, would think about in the area for stormwater funding is stormwater utility fee. That's the previously monthly, now annual fee that each different stormwater utility in the area charge to their property owner. So the city charges city residents, the county charges county residents. Many of the towns have their own internal fees. That fee is generally used to fund salaries and then primarily maintenance work, regulatory work. And we at the city do small projects with that fee, but don't directly fund large projects, other than that we do occasionally use our small project fee to do concept work on projects that are going to become large projects. So we have a better idea of how to go after grants or how to ask for funding rather than coming in with a very undefined ask early on. Primary funding source for us for capital work is the city drainage fund. That's again, a relatively small portion of our total, but roughly $7 million a year coming from a few different sources, business licensing fees, a little bit of property tax millage, goes towards capital project work. We have tax increment financing, if anyone's familiar with that. That's where we're using property taxes to help fund drainage projects that then help increase the developability and property values within an area. That's not something we do a lot of work with for stormwater, but there are a few projects that we do that with, and there is a specific TIF for stormwater improvement in the Church Creek Basin that was set up as sort of a unique approach to deal with flooding in an area with special flooding needs. The low battery, which we'll talk about in a minute, that was an accommodation hospitality tax funded project. That funding source is generally used for things, of course, that in, I guess, the industry lexicon put heads in beds. So you have to show that it's really going to have direct impact on your tourism spending, which is why it was a great funding source for the battery. We do a lot of project leveraging. We're going to talk about that through the presentation, where we try to say it's very expensive to build any kind of infrastructure project as a standalone item. So the battery, again, a good example. If you wanted to repair the failing seawall, that is a very expensive project. If you wanted to replace all of the water and sewer lines through Murray Boulevard, very expensive project. If you know, et cetera, as you go through all the different items. If you leverage all of those projects together and build them in one effort, the cumulative cost is not nearly what it would have been if you added all those individual projects together. When you build them together, you get a lot of cost savings because you're in the same space doing the same work. So your incremental costs are much, much smaller than any individual standalone project. So it's a really good opportunity to do drainage as part of other linear infrastructure is basically the easy way to think about that. But it doesn't have to be linear infrastructure, as we will talk about in some future slides. Also collaboration. So we have many entities in this area that are doing other significant projects. We need to make sure we continue to work together with those entities to help fund these projects, both through project leveraging, like we talked about, because many of these entities care about stormwater. Charleston Water Systems is a great example of that we do frequently overlap on leveraged projects where they want to replace water or sewer, we want to replace stormwater, we collaborate to do a cheaper total project. But they also care about reducing stormwater impacts of flooding into their sewer systems, which reduces sanitary sewer overflows, makes less pressure on the Plum Island wastewater treatment plant. So direct improvements to flooding are also a direct improvement to the CWS system. And again, hopefully some more obvious improvements when you talk about county, state, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We've had some good success working with private companies to invest in stormwater to help improve how their projects develop. And then I guess I use the term non-governmental organizations, thinking of all the different nonprofits and stakeholders we have in the area, many of whom have been wonderful partners on our project work. And then finally, grants. We've got grants at the federal and state level, and also through a lot of those same nonprofit partners. So I swear that's going to be my longest slide with least pictures. So I'm going to start with the projects we've completed recently. So the Concord Pump Station upfit. This is the pump station that sits in front of the International African American Museum. It was built about just over 26 years ago. We recently completed basically replacing every single thing within the pump station except for the exterior of the building. We did replace the roof. It hit its end of service life. We took the opportunity to upsize that pump station, make it even more effective and resilient. In blue, you can see the service area that drains into that pump station, both sort of the entire area around Market Street, as well as the original service area for the pump station of Calhoun Street going over to Meeting and then going up Meeting to about the visitor center. That project was done over the course of 2 years, only half of each year, to avoid basically working on the pumps during hurricane season so that we could have maximum performance during hurricane season and work in the off season. Low battery extension, as was just mentioned, this is the phase 1 side of the battery extension, but we continued this from the Coast Guard station at Trad all the way around Murray Boulevard to White Point Gardens. Just wrapped all of that up. This was all accommodation hospitality tax funded, plus some contribution from CWS towards their water and sewer line replacements. Really good example of a leverage project that does everything from controlling against increasing tides, storm surge, improved drainage along the project corridor and upstream of the project corridor, installed the linear park, obviously, and then bike and pedestrian improvements. This also is being tied in as part of project leveraging to brick arch repairs and some other things that we'll talk about of how we improve getting water out from those other upgrades that we're doing. Because if the projects don't work together and talk to each other, they end up not being successful in the long run. So we like to talk about you build to solve today's flooding, but so that you can also accommodate future projects and future conditions. Barbary Woods, moving out to Johns Island. This is the Dale Morris Ecological Park that Kaylin had mentioned. It's about just over 20 acres, almost 25 acres of basically constructed wetland and stream channel in an area to divert water out of neighborhoods that were flooding. And instead it takes that water into this system and brings it downstream of those neighborhoods so the neighborhoods can continue to drain. We had a $5 million grant from the South Carolina Office of Resilience from their ACIP funding on this project. That just wrapped up substantial completion very recently, and now we're kind of going through punch list items, and it'll have ecological projects are always interesting that you get a really wonderful, again, leverage benefit of both wildlife and ecology improvements, but also quality of like direct quality of life improvements. There's walking trails, a lot of beauty, take some of the properties sort of out of that were not very suitable for development out of the development project corridor and brings them into natural conservation of what people love about Johns Island, which are these beautiful wildlife habitats. And as it continues to grow and leaf out, it will look better and better every year as we go forward. So these are something we've been very proud of and done quite a few of lately. The Howell Avenue Flood Storage Project, this is around James Island at the end of Howell Avenue. Completed this construction at the end of 2025. This project was fully funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and a grant that we did with them. And basically we added pedestrian interconnectivity between 2 roads in an area that were also previously unconnected, similar to the Barbary Woods project. This one's about 3.5 acres, a little bit smaller, and added in a meandering stream through the project site that basically bypasses some of the canal in this area to reduce flooding as well. That was originally a Greenbelt acquisition as well. So what we were able to do with Greenbelt to add bike ped, some passive recreation and flood reduction as well as ecological improvements. Then Church Creek Flood Storage Project. So this is Bridgepoint Ecological Park. We actually have a ribbon cutting on this next week. There's 2 smaller sites on Wolk and Mowler that were associated with this as well. That construction is all complete. There's a playground, a little bit of active recreation on the Bridgepoint site. Is a larger site, all separated from neighboring streets, about 5 acres. Another acre between the Wolk and Mallor sites, which are just around the corner. $1.3 million from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation from their emergency resilience funding. Great support in this one from Nature Conservancy, who brought in some private partners as well towards funding, including Google on this project. Been very helpful, good partnership work. Nature Conservancy is building an education and outreach component into the project for us as well, so we can help teach the community and the youth about why wetlands are important for stormwater and how kind of the native low country system works to handle flood mitigation. Shifting kind of the other end of the spectrum again, we keep going back and forth a little bit. Large scale pump stations, the Spring Fishburne US 17 pump station that's going up between the two West Ashley bridges. That's the culmination of 5 phases of deep tunnel US 17 improvements. So this is another leverage project. The original project reprogrammed the Septima Clark US 17 corridor. If anyone has lived here for more than 10 years or so, you can remember what it used to look like. Added that pedestrian interconnectivity that you see now across the corridor, reworked all of the traffic signals to improve traffic flow through the area, and then worked through the flooding. That was originally with Tiger grants for the transportation improvements and pedestrian improvements. Then worked through the flood reduction to handle what was causing a lot of the traffic backup and accidents. Currently, the pump station, this as a result had quite a bit of funding from the South Carolina Transportation Infrastructure Bank, our King Street Gateway TIF, and SCDOT and US DOT through the Tiger grant at the time. This is expected to be substantially complete this year. We'll do kind of an extended shakedown cruise, let's say, on that project, and then start loading in our SCADA implementation, which is basically remote operation of all of the pump stations as we hit larger levels here. One more pump station to talk about. I think there's 2 more. This is the UG King Street pump station over in front of the Ensign Homes property. A great partnership with the Housing Authority, where they collaborated to donate land into pump station siting to help reduce flooding and flood access onto their property, as well as obviously the incredibly important corridor of street corridor with UG Street and King Street. We also received $10 million of grant funding from SCRIA through the state from their SCIP grant source. Estimating construction completion in the next few months on this one for substantial completion, and then again, punch list items to close this out. Another good example of a leverage project where not just flood reduction, but also park space and beautification. The Windermere Drainage Improvement Project is actually just finished bidding. We'll be coming to council for a construction award in the next couple meetings. Start construction this year, complete construction late next year. This is draining out the Windermere neighborhood through collaboration with CWS by doing improvements along the Greenway, which is a city park on top of a CWS linear piece of infrastructure, and CCSD, the school district, giving us some land through the back of their school to add new stormwater outfalls to help drain out this neighborhood, and also receive some state appropriation funding with a lot of support from Representative Stavronakis. MUSC pump station upfit. This just finished design. We just had our final design approval meeting with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer partnership project, where basically the city led the design efforts through this upfit work. It's the upfitting of an existing pump station that drains out basically Courtney Drive coming down into Calhoun Street. This is another station, about 20 years old, past its service life, and has some challenges. So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will be contributing a significant amount of funding into the construction of this project, a little over $3 million. MUSC has been a big supporter since we're working basically in one of their structures that has this city operated and owned pump station within it. So good example of partnership from both funding and construction. That will go into construction likely late this year and then continue for probably 18 months due to some of the lead times on heavy mechanical and electrical equipment. DuPont Wapu, the first phase of this project, Orleans Road, is due to go into construction this year. We're just finalizing our last couple of permits. This is state appropriations funding for most of this project. It's been a long time collaborative project between the city of Charleston and Charleston County, looking at how do you deal with flooding in this 1,600 acre basin that is centered around Citadel Mall. We're also leveraging this into a small project that the city is doing in Hazelwood and Taborwood, which are some of the streets that come off of Orleans here, to tie into the large scale capital project with some smaller scale work. And then we'll have follow on larger scale efforts in this, but those are a little further away, so not covered too much in this presentation, which is all short-term work. Central Park drainage. This is over on James Island again and Central Park Road. Design's complete here. We're just waiting for our final permitting documents from the Army Corps of Engineers for some of the stream and wetland impacts. Expected construction start and bidding this year. Have $1.5 million of SCRA funding again from the state on this project. Another long-term collaboration between Charleston County and the city of Charleston. Charleston County's just finished its Central Park Road project, which was elevating the portion of Central Park Road a little bit to the west of here so that the tide would no longer overtop that road. We will be upsizing culverts under a number of roads in the area and doing some canal improvements. These both our project and the county project leverage back with the Howell project that is on the northern side of this basin that we talked about before, the ecological park. And then the county is also in design on a follow-on project that leverages into the top of this project. So continued significant partnership and work. Brick arch rehabilitation upfit. So this is another one that's finished design. We are going through permitting currently, mostly cultural resources permitting. To continue upfitting the brick arch system under the peninsula. We've done quite a few pilot projects as a city showing the cost benefit ratios and success methodologies. This is a relatively innovative work of how to do this. The Army Corps of Engineers, as Kaylin mentioned, has come to the table with quite a bit of funding to help accelerate that project. So we're working with them right now through their permitting process to do three sub-phases of this work, basically continuing the work the city had done on starting at the battery and basically going up Limehouse, Trad, Logan, coming up to Calhoun, taking that and going north now from Calhoun up to the top of the arches, which is around Morris, taking the eastern portion of Calhoun Street, roughly from the Aquarium, Washington Street area over to Meeting Street, and then the majority of Trad Street. So those will be kind of the next three corridors as we continue to work through the city, bringing in again some Army Corps of Engineer funding. Church Creek flood storage. So going back into Church Creek, this is the last of this initial round of National Fish and Wildlife Foundation funded designs that we did. This is on the south side of Bees Ferry. Bees Ferry will be on the left side of the screen here. This is the kind of major canal that runs down near some of the churches in the area, and then on the other side will be the future city fire training facility. Looking at, again, doing a stream improvement, wetland improvement. We're in final permitting on this one, probably start construction next year. Moving back to the medical district, Dowdy Street drainage. So the city, as I mentioned, the Spring Fishburne project, we did a previous project with HUD funding through their disaster recovery and mitigation program to help drain out Earhart Street, because Earhart Street is a major corridor for the internal traffic and some of the emergency room traffic in the hospital district, in the medical district. So HUD, due to the service levels of especially MUSC, but also the VA and to some extent Roper on the low to moderate income population, basically were able to support us in an application. We brought about $10 million of HUD funding in a number of years ago that they get after disasters, and we're able to add a sort of a stub out tunnel and add it, we would call it, over to Earhart Street. And now we are doing some follow-on surface connection work to improve the connections from Jonathan Lucas over to Earhart Street to further connect more of the medical district again into this deep tunnel and pump station system. That should start construction this year as well. It's been a really good partnership project with MUSC. Their new head of a lot of their infrastructure and facilities group has been kind of coordinating the demolition of some of the buildings they have out here with us, because obviously we're asking them to basically open up streets within their medical campus and try to avoid impacts to hospitals while we're doing that. Lake Dotter flood protection. This is moving back into West Ashley, just above Glen McConnell Parkway, near the city park that's on the north side, as you're coming through Glen McConnell. So there's a lot of flooding associated with the lakes down here. We are currently working with Charleston County with some funding that they receive from ARPA that they've given to us to lead design work on improvements to the basically the berm that protects this lake from Church Creek and some of the internal drainage systems. That is in design right now. Likely we'll have design and permitting done late this year to early next year, and then expecting a construction start next year. Cooper Jackson drainage. This is the Upper East Side of the peninsula. We're just up a $5 million grant from the South Carolina Office of Resilience. It's actually the first of this type of grant that they've handed out in the state, with their own internal state level funding rather than kind of pass through regulatory agency funding from like a federal source. We finished roughly 50% design, which will allow us now to move to a design build contractor to manage some of the utility relocations on the improvements on the first phase, which is sort of the work under Morrison, and back into the parking lots that the city owns for that we use for a combination of things, including access to the bridge, the Ravenel Bridge walkway. With an expected construction start after that design build contractor comes on and goes through final permitting of probably mid to late 2027. And then lastly, New Market Creek, ecological park project we're looking at. This sits under the accesses to the Ravenel Bridge. If you're familiar with this portion of also the Upper East Side. We're about to accept at council a $1 million National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant towards this project. That'll let us bring on a consultant. So we're just starting design on this one. This is a great opportunity to leverage the Lowline project, which also ties into the same corridor to try to bring more pedestrian interconnectivity, bring more access to the ecology, natural features, and water in the area, and also provide some significant flood relief in collaboration with that ecological improvement. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully that was helpful and interesting to hear more about. Tried to keep it at kind of the near-term projects. There are more projects than this that we're working on, but these are the ones that are sort of either just completed construction, about to go into construction, or just finishing design, not the ones that are a little bit longer term. So there are some other ones longer term, but kind of highlighted on things that are quickly going into the next phase of project life. Kaylin, that's what I got.
Thanks, Matt. I think, again, bring it back to the purpose of this group. We are the Basin Flood Action Committee. So I think, Matt, you gave a very comprehensive where we're at in, I think, pretty much every area of the city doing work. So we do have 10 minutes left. I did want to, Mr. Mayor, I know you gave a little TST update halfway through. If there's any other things you wanted to bring to the attention of this committee and update, I wanted to give you space for that. And then we can close out with some questions, and I'll go over our next few meetings.
Yep, I got to drop because I got to be somewhere at 5. But just a quick update. We're working very closely on some kind of final details with the Army Corps on the battery extension, which has evolved in a pretty positive way. We'll be up in DC next week with Kaylin and company, soliciting funds for a variety of different things, but also meeting with our federal delegation to try and get, again, money and help on, among other things, the battery extension and other resiliency efforts. So a lot going on right now, and certainly appreciate the color and comments from this committee, and exciting stuff, generally speaking. So I feel like we are moving the ball forward on a variety of fronts. So I just appreciate what everybody does. And sorry I got to drop to get to a meeting, but it's very productive for me, and good to see everyone.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, anybody else with a few minutes, questions for Matt based off his presentation, discussion with other committee members? I'll throw up our next meetings too, and I will put it out there that obviously we're a year into this committee and welcome input of, we've been doing a lot of talking from what the city's doing, but obviously, as Matt pointed out, we have a lot of collaborators on our flood projects and flood planning, from funders to other partners. So we are always happy, similarly how we had Molly as a guest from the county, any other folks from agencies, other community partners are happy to reach out to if there's something of interest for this committee to have them talk about. My plan is in May, hopefully by our May or July meeting, to have our friends and partners at the Army Corps to come and talk a little more broadly about the progress on our tidal and inland work and maybe some of these other projects that Matt worked. But, we don't have to get an answer today, but just please think that over and then share with me, because I think that will bring, even more color to this committee as we can get some more special guests, if you will, involved as well. But we have a few minutes. So anybody, if any comments, discussion for the group, Gray, I see your hand.
Yeah, I first of all want to thank, you and Matt and Molly for your updates. Always fascinating. I'd love to dive in deeper on each of the areas that you were discussing today. And Matt, I'd love to see those longer term projects, if there's any way that I can explore those with you. Something I'm very interested in is the progress of the zoning update that the city is going through, and how that's going to take everything that we've learned about sea level rise, about the movement of our marshes and tidal estuaries, and try to create opportunities for us to develop with intention, like towards the elevation, and put density towards where people are out of harm's way. So if there could be a way for us to explore that theme and get updates on that process in a future meeting, I would greatly appreciate that.
Definitely. And, they're Matt's cohorts within his section. And I've had a conversation with our planning team leading that. And I know there's a lot of movement going to be happening on that this year. And I think definitely opportunity for input to this committee and public inputs as well. So I will certainly reach out to them to see when it makes the best sense for where they're at in that process to come and give an update to this committee. So thank you, Greg.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Maybank. Mr. Maybank, I see. Oh, there you go. Gotcha.
Yes. I was, first of all, thanks for the presenters. That was really nice. I got to get some information. What I didn't hear was the connection between Rosemount Water Plan and the one that Matt has been working on, with all the different sections in the city and peninsula. And I'm curious as to where Rosemount stands, with how all that ties in with what we had suggested to the county, the mayor, and all about before the wall was going to be brought up into fruition. We were going to have this water plan, and I'm curious as to where Rosemount is in all of this planning, where it's all going to culminate and come together. I know you said you had some information and was going to post it on the Rosemount web. I don't have that information.
Yep.
And so could I get any kind of answer to what I just alluded to?
Of course. I will share with you directly, Mr. Maybank, the reports. And as I said, those would be live on the website, and share that with the community so they can post that on the Facebook. And we actually, the team modeled, you'll see there's going to be project sheets. And again, for near, mid, and longer term. And we really modeled those based off of conversations with Matt and how his team gets to project implementation and through this phasing. And we even developed our project sheets the same way that he presents it to council and other funders. So we've delivered those to Matt. And as we discussed prior, particularly with the coordination with SCDOT and the sound wall, we're going to set up a meeting and conversation with that, and continue to coordinate with our team and theirs to get that through. I'll let Matt, I know, there's obviously, the routine maintenance and all that we'll continue to do as well. But now that we have these project sheets, where we didn't have before, we didn't even have concepts of what, you know, we understood from the community what the problems were, but now we have the data driven that's driving these projects that now Matt can take to council. We can take to our other funding partners to move on them. So Matt, if you wanted to say any other words of how, you know, your process for integrating projects into, you know, the list you take to council and all, and how Rosemont could fit into that, you know, this year as you're putting your list together for.
Yeah, that's great, Colin. Yeah, so you're exactly right that we normally start out. We have to start with some definition of project approach. As I mentioned at the beginning, one of the ways we do that is we'll do a small project funding to look at the concept of what could be done in an area to resolve flooding, which then lets us eventually go for capital project funding. I think for Rosemont, you basically you created a parallel pathway there where rather than kind of going through that somewhat time-intensive process to compete for small project funding for consideration and then into concept work and then back to compete again for capital project funding, you've already got those project concepts. So you're basically at the point where you can look to see, are any of those immediately in this upcoming round eligible for or chosen for allocation by council for small project funding or capital project funding. Small project funding being set up specifically because it is much quicker. It is just lower dollar numbers available. The capital project funding, also very important. That's how we get to most of the larger scale projects we just talked about. That you'll see most of those projects we just talked about that are getting to construction now probably got funded about 5 years ago. So that's why we like the small project allocation is much quicker. I will say Rosemont has kind of jumped a couple of years ahead, Kaylin, with that work that y'all have done, and we provide some input on.
Yeah, you froze Matt, but I will say too,
Shrink
you know,
timeframes down.
Yeah, sorry, Matt, we lost you for a minute, but and I will say too, like for the longer term projects, this is something that we're delivering through our work with the Army Corps too, and through some of that funding that we could apply to do this as well. Okay, I've got y'all for 2 more minutes. I won't go ahead and flash it on my screen, but just a reminder, our next meeting is May 7th, and then we have one on July 9th, September 3rd, and then in November. So please, 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 you should have these on your calendar. You know, I'm going to share messages with the whole committee so we can hopefully continue to build our attendance at these meetings and keep providing you content and discussions where we can keep moving the needle forward with our basin flood action. So I will offer up any final words before we close up for the day. But Gray, see your hand one more time.
Yeah, I appreciate the desire to increase committee participation. I would also love to see the public more engaged in this process as well, because I think this is incredibly valuable information that would love for our citizens to be aware of and to be able to engage with, to support the work that all of you are doing. So what are some ways that we can try to increase constructive comment and participation in this process?
Yeah, so I'm talking through and I'm developing, you know, continually evolving the WaterWise communication strategy. I'm hoping to utilize our, you know, very popular city newsletter to get out the word when we're holding these meetings, social media. We can work together if you all have your own networks, whether through your neighborhood or community organizations that you're representing, or, you know, medical district folks, to just get out the word when these committees are happening. I would say, obviously, with any city committee, it's not always the best time of day for folks to join live. We do live stream this, so this will forever live on the city's YouTube page. So, you know, just elevating where that content is for folks. Yeah, you know, we haven't had any public input or comment coming up. And I think, you know, more broadly looking out as this committee develops, we maybe doing some of these in person eventually too might help as well. So again, open to thoughts as we continue to move forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, seeing no more hands, I'm going to go ahead and close this out and look forward to seeing everybody in May, but know where to find me between now and then.